I've told lots of stories about getting out of college, getting a job preaching in a little town in central Texas. Thought that's what I was going to spend my whole career doing. Figured out in about 2 or 3 weeks that I'd gotten the wrong field and needed to get out, but I was embarrassed, so I went ahead and did it for 3 years. Need to tell another story or two about that to kick off my part of the study of the Psalms. And let me say this time, I'm not going to say the old Texas saying that I ain't good in the old Bible. So mark that one off. When I moved to that little town, just immediately somebody came to see me at the little apartment where I was staying and said, "Preacher, they tell me that you play the guitar. Is that right?" I said, "Well, I own a guitar and I know chords, and yeah, I play some, but I'm not a guitar player when you in the sense that you might mean. So what are you asking?" He said, "Well, preacher, we're having a parade next weekend for celebrating something, and we've got a band that's going to be on the back of a truck playing while we go up and down the street in the parade. And we need a guitar player to back up the fiddle and the bass. Can you do that?" "Yeah, I can do that." "Okay, will you do it?" "Yeah, I did it." The downtown part of the town was 3 blocks long, so we drove up and down the street several times, playing some of the same songs, Rubber Dolly, and you've heard the songs. The word got back to me later that some of the members of the church were wondering, what kind of a mess have we got ourselves into here, a guitar-playing preacher? While I'm telling preacher stories, I need to tell one other one that happened right away. They got me to join the Rotary Club, which seemed like a good thing to do. One of the ladies in the church was the cook for the Rotary Club. She was acknowledged to be the best cook in town. They wanted to have a breakfast for the Boy Scouts, raise money. They're going to serve pancakes and bacon and eggs and get donations and all that. And one of the men came to me and said, "Preacher, I understand you were a fry cook in college." "Yeah, that's right, I was." "Would you help us out with that breakfast?" Sure, no problem." The morning of the breakfast, I went up there, and some had come early. There were already probably 40 people there ready to eat. And they were cooking pancakes 3 at a time, and strips of bacon 5 at a time, and eggs 2 at a time. And we probably would have still been there. But I said, "Now, you want me to help with this?" "Yeah." I said, "Okay, go ahead and forgive me at the front end of how we're going to do this. We'll do it the way you do it in the cafe." And I took over and became a bully, hollering at everybody, "Crack a dozen eggs at once and put them in there and turn the heat up. Put a whole pound of bacon in that skillet and turn it, bring it out," etc. The people were real divided about whether they were going to like me or not after that breakfast, but I was careful to avoid cooking after that. Now, I told those stories to set us up to talk about church music. The Psalms are the songbook of the Israelites. Sometimes the words bother us a little because they don't quite fit. And when you think about the fact that they're songs, why, it makes more sense. In the psych of religion, which is my field, when you talk to people about the music of a religious group, they'll tell you something like this: you can tell more about the religion of a group by their music than you can by their dogmatic theology. So that's where you really get to how they are in their hearts, what they really desire, and how they go about their business. It's their songbook. So that's the approach we're going to take during my time in talking about the Psalms. As it is now, so it was then. There were different kinds of songs. let me do now first, get those out of the way. Then we'll talk about then, the kinds of songs that they had. I spent a lifetime leading singing here and there. I was dismayed to find out when certain surveys were taken that people didn't necessarily like my song leading and didn't necessarily like me. And then I, of course, remembered that I was a public figure, and that can be said of virtually every public figure, some more than others. So some of the themes of our songs now, one, I got troubles. We can sing about how awful things are for us, and maybe it's going to work out and maybe it isn't. Why is everybody always picking on me? I have adversaries and enemies and people that say and do things against me, and I wish they wouldn't do that. And that really is true of the Psalms. My country is better than your country. We got better leaders. We got better people. We got better resources. We got better religion. Mine's better than yours. It's called ethnocentrism, if you're interested in the technical name for that. One that's very interesting to me is let's give some publicity to, the sopranos get all the publicity. Everybody sings the tune. Let's give some publicity to the altos, the tenors, or the basses. And one of my profs in college liked to say that this particular song is not about seeking the lost. It's about a bass lead, so they could have some publicity, and we can really bellow it out whenever we get to that point. There are songs about God's going to get you. You better cut out what you're doing, or you're going to get it. Heaven is the only thing that will bail me out. My situation is hopeless, and dying and going to heaven is all I can do to be okay about it. I'm just a little old blank, blank, blank. Fill in the blank. Depending on what the situation is at the moment. And one that is the most characteristic of my part of the world, where I came from originally. My life is about hard work, and heaven will be a time of rest. You could put names to all those songs, and we still use them. Now, while we're doing that, let's talk about the kinds of songs. I want to be a little bit prosaic here about this, because this is where the scholars really get to going in naming the kinds of psalms that there are and going to great explanations of how they work and all that. And most of that is just people showing off because they learned a bunch of stuff and need to say it. Let me run through the kinds of psalms that are characteristic. First of all is hymns of praise. Our reaction to encounter with God and God's people is, woo, my, you're a great God, and I like that. Songs of praise. Songs of enthronement. You're the king of my life. You're the king of history. You are in charge. All of this comes from your creation. Songs of enthronement. Songs of Zion, the place which is the center of our faith. It may be Zion, or it may be Jerusalem, or it may be some other. Laments. Woe is me, because I'm in the middle of sinful people and I'm a sinful person myself. Psalms of trust. That I depend on God. I risk my well-being to follow God. I believe that God is on my side and has my best interest at heart, and that things will work out. Psalms of thanksgiving. Occasionally, and of course we have holidays to celebrate this, we just have to stop and think, my goodness, how fortunate we are with what we have, where we live, whom we live with, the circumstances of our lives. While we're talking about that, I've said several times during our year of being shut in with the COVID-19, I feel a kind of a survivor's remorse sometimes, because things have been so good for Judy and me, and we've known all along that they're so horrible for some people, and we feel almost guilty, as though somehow we don't deserve for things to be that good. There are royal psalms, which are for times of coronation, when you have a new king or new priest or whatever. Excuse me. There are wisdom psalms. There are those among us who know. They have lived life and learned from others, had experiences of how things work. They can say it, so we have Proverbs, or they can sing it. And sometimes when you sing it, it's more powerful than when you say it. There are liturgies, songs that you write especially for events that may be recurring or may be one-time things. We don't need to be too technical about those aspects of psalms, because the words take care of that. Is this a psalm of praise? Is this a song of lament? Or what is it? So we're not going to spend much time dwelling on that and parsing that and put everybody to sleep. One of the questions that comes up about psalms, in lots of them, there are directions at the end. Words that we don't know. And frankly, we're not sure, in most cases, what those words mean. We think they are directions to the musicians about things to do and say, how loud to be, the tempo, things of that sort. The most famous of those, of course, is Selah, S-E-L-A-H. We think maybe Selah was a designation that we need to stop singing for a minute and let somebody play. In the music world, you'd call that a riff. This guy needs to show his technical skills at whatever instrument he's playing, so everybody be quiet except him and let's hear what he's got to do. Excuse me. In college, of course, when you're looking for something smart-alecky to say, when somebody comes out with some kind of saying that you question whether it's completely right or not, one or more may say, Selah, meaning, oh, okay, all right, you said that. Now let's talk about something else. Musical directions. A word about David and the Psalms. David is given credit either by the Psalm itself or by students, scholars, etc., for somewhere in the neighborhood of half of all the Psalms, and there are a lot. I'm a little bit skeptical about his doing that many. Probably the one that is this may be an arguable point, is the 51st Psalm, which is sung by all kinds of groups, choruses, etc., because he has done the sins that he did and has been called to task about it, and is on his knees and on his face to say, I wish I hadn't done that. I was not behaving the way I was supposed to behave. Grant unto me the joys of thy salvation. So David wrote a bunch of them. Whether he did or not, we have them, we like them, we use them. They mean a lot to us. And I think I remember correctly that Old Testament sayings or songs or whatever, the Psalms are quoted more in the New Testament than any other part of the Old Testament. Because of the kinds of things that are done, they fit, they express thoughts that the New Testament writer meant to say, and so they're used a lot. Our psalm today is chapter 16, Psalm 16. I'm not going to read the psalm. That's something you can do in very few minutes. And my approach to the Psalms is, when I need to read one, then I'll read it. I don't do very well with it if I'm just talking about it. But I've picked 3 themes out of the 16th Psalm. First is trust in God and his saving power. I think it's a universal human experience to have times in life when you recognize I need to be rescued. I need to be saved. That may be mental, spiritual, physical, financial, social. Maybe unsure about which way to turn with a certain decision. Is this the right thing to do? Is this thing going to work? And what we know is that we're beyond our ability. That we have we've run past our technology, our wisdom, and we need to trust in God's saving power. That's the first thing. The second is, hooray for the saints of our land who have not chosen another God than the true God. It's a little bit hard for us in our day and time because we recognize about things that we carve or things that we mold. They're just things. They don't have a soul or a spirit. It's hard for us to think about them living in a time of idols. And you made choices about which gods we're going to serve. And the question is, are you going to serve Yahweh or some other god or gods? When you chose the right God, the only God, the true and the living God, you deserve credit for that. Did then, do now. And third, I have had good things from God, and especially guidance. We look back at our lives and think about crisis times when we had to make decisions, and we weren't sure we were doing the right thing. And years later, when it turns out that it was the right thing and it's worked out right for us, we're overcome with gratitude. I say nothing but thanks for looking after me in that. It's always a little bit risky to attribute things to God. And so what we do is we tend to put it more in speculative language, something like this. God may not have done that, but it sure looks like it. The 16th Psalm is lovely for those 3 themes. And the others are going to be great as well. As we pull all this together, I want to wind up with some semi-humorous things, some semi-wisdom things from my own lifetime of involvement with music, and especially with music related to fill-in preaching and work for churches like that. And while I'm on that subject, I need to say that most of you probably know that there was a 40-year period when this Edmond church had as one of its main people one of the 3 or 4 most famous, competent church musicians in the Church of Christ. Guy's named Helterbrand, I think, something of that sort. He was famous around here, but he was famous everywhere. Everywhere I went, people said, "Do you know Ken Helterbrand?" "Yeah, I sure do." "What do you think about him?" "Well, he's not as good as I am, but he can get by." The fact is that he was kind of the it. Did hundreds of weddings and funerals and all kinds of things, and now he's depending on us for some prayers for health. Love Ken Helterbrand. I'm going to talk about some things that drove me crazy when I was doing fill-in preaching or when I was involved in singing at some church on a temporary basis. If I was going to go to X town to preach on a Sunday when the preacher was going to be long, They might have somebody leading singing that was so awful that it would have been better not to have singing. It was low, it was slow, it was listless, it was lifeless. And I sat, as I was about to get up to preach, saying to myself, can I find the energy to motivate this group in ways that I'm hoping for because of the failure of the music? Worse than that was when we had a funeral at a church like that. What are we going to do for music? The practice of using congregational singing is relatively new for funerals in the Church of Christ. That has happened during my lifetime because they always put together a group, and that was always problematic. One of my favorite stories about funeral singing in a group is Harold Fletcher was hunting me one day in Bartlesville. School was out. Everybody was gone home. Some prominent figure had died in the downtown Sixton Dewey Church. He had to do the music, and he couldn't find anybody, so he finally got me and one girl, and he wrote parts for all three of us. And the church was so crowded that there was nowhere for us to stand or sit, so we stood in the baptistry, which was dry, fortunately, and sang for that funeral. What are we going to do? And that leads me to one of two stories that I want to finish with. First is when you're the minister for a small church and you're a real young guy that people are a little bit questionable, they're kind of questioning your skills and all that, the victories are few and far between. High points where you say, that was really good. At that little town where I was, it was 21 miles from Cleburne, Texas. When I was in Abilene Christian, there was a guy who was one of my best friends, sang in the a cappella chorus and groups and all that, who was the best singer I ever had anything to do with. He was a show-nuff, high first tenor, could sing just however high he wanted to, and was really great. He drove from Abilene to Cleburne to lead singing for one of the big churches in Cleburne, and on Saturday he would come over to my town, spend the day with me, and we'd play ping pong, and I'd cook him a steak, and had a great time. On this particular day he came, we were going to have a funeral, and I said, let's put together a quartet. It's me and him, both of us high singers, experienced singers with quartets. We had a bass who could read music and was unobtrusive, and we had a man who could sing a tune well and follow along well with other singers. So we put together a male quartet. The building where the church met had acoustics, and if I may boast, the four of us filled that building up. People were craning their neck and looking around during the funeral, and for several weeks thereafter, people quizzed me about it. Said, "Preacher, what in the world were you all doing? Did you have a big sound system in there? We never heard anything like that." And that went on and on and on. In that little church, there were some people who thought they knew more about music than they did. One man in particular, on Wednesday night, when I was talking about memorizing songs, said, "I need to say that I'm a music man myself, and you can't memorize a song." Everybody laughed then, and they laughed thereafter. They told that, so they asked me that question a lot. "Are you a music man yourself?" And of course, they all shook when they asked the question. Now, to finish with a story about Cail. Whenever there was going to be a holiday at Cail, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whenever, we didn't have many people that showed up for Wednesday night service. It was about to be Thanksgiving. One of the one of our members, an important member, was the daughter of a famous Christian college museum who had directed courses for years, was highly respected, highly educated in music, and very well thought of, was going to come and see her. So one of our guys, one of our ministers said, why don't we get him to lead a devotional for the Wednesday night thing? Everybody will enjoy that, enjoy singing with him. Okay, good idea. Somehow it hadn't dawned on us that he had gotten old and had had lots of medical problems, was getting quite feeble, but agreed to do the service and kept us all breathless all the way through it, that he was going to fall or just pass out completely. And when it was over, we were all terribly relieved. Our son Trey was about, the guy that does the songs here at Edmond sometimes, that doctor that he'll lead you singing or he'll give you some pills, whichever you need at the moment. Was about 10, I guess. Now, it so happened that I was the song leader at Cail at that time, and so on the way home that night from church, he said, Dad, can I ask you something? Well, yeah. What? Dad, when you get too old to lead singing, will you quit? I said, well, yeah, of course I will. How will I know? He said, Dad, I'll tell you. And he did, and I did. And so you haven't seen me doing a lot of song leading, and you have seen him. Thank you for your support of him. I hope we enjoyed the study of Psalms. I promise not to tell too many stories. Well, maybe I'm going to tell some anyway. Okay. Let's finish with a prayer. Father, we're thankful for music, for your music, for the thoughts that can be expressed and the attachments that we can do with our music. We're thankful for the Psalms and pray that you will bless our study. In Jesus' name, amen.